welcome to the Evolution of Event Design. We are so excited to have the opportunity to partner with CORT Events today to bring you this virtual event. I'm Ashton Pike, for those I haven't gotten to meet virtually or in person, and I'm the editorial director at BizBash, as well as your host and moderator of today's event. Over the next hour, we'll be talking about how event design has evolved over the last year and how we're preparing for the future of events. As we dive into these topics, please feel free to add your questions into the chat as they come, and we'll address them during the last 15 minutes of our session at the end. But before we jump in, I'd love to introduce my co-host for today, Lillian Shen.
Thanks, Ashton. Hi, everyone. My name is Lillian Shen. I am the Director of Marketing for CORT Events. And as Ashton said, we're so excited to bring you today's event. You know, so much has changed over the last year, and I know now we're all looking forward to just how things will evolve looking forward. And we have a great panel of very experienced event designers that are bringing to us today a wealth of experience and knowledge. So why don't we bring them all in?
Absolutely. So I have the honor today of introducing our all-star panelists, starting with Carrie Otto, who is the District Account Executive for CORT Events. And Carrie has been designing live events nationwide for over a decade. And then boasting over 40 years of combined experience, we also have Jordan Carbati and Evan Carbati, partners of Carbati Experiences. Jordan and Evan continue to design custom experiences throughout the US as well as abroad. We're so thrilled to have you all here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
For having us.
Lillian, you want to kick us off with these panelists? We have so many questions for you guys today.
Absolutely. Let's jump right in. So the first question I have for you all, like I said, event design has changed so much this past year, whether it's in, social events, corporate events, whatever it may be. What would each of you say is the biggest trend that's here to stay? And, we can speak to specifically to various functions. So whether it's, corporate meetings, networking spaces, how venues are being used, dining, feel free to cover all of that. Carrie, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So CORT has been evolving daily since the pandemic all started. We've introduced new products from our safety collection, for example, minimalist clear dividers that are being used nationally, greenery that's very lifelike to create that physical distancing, keep people feeling it's like it's an organic barrier. We also have launched 2 educational resources for our clients, the Build Your Meeting campaign that actually touches on, it's really mainly for corporate planners and shows how to design a live event in today's world. And as well, we just launched the Love in Full Color lookbook, which is really for weddings and how to design that, and curated lookbooks, lookbook options for our clients there. So if you haven't gotten a copy of them, reach out to us. We can definitely send you the download. But one of the biggest trends that we've seen that is discussed in both guides is creating that sanctuary experience for clients, whether it's at a corporate event or at a social event. So creating a more open space. Everyone's been accustomed to more space now. We've had micro weddings, we've had micro meetings. So going forward, we'll still see that, space change for live events. We've been creating floor plans on 6-foot grids, and now we're creating them on 3 to 4-foot grids or none at all. It's literally changing every day. I think we are sharing a space plan that we actually had made for a wedding at some point today that you'll see. But using that design element of more space, using elevated chairs that are larger footprint for a 72-inch round, not having as many people at a 72-inch round that you would have had in 2019, 2018, having that banquet seating at a wedding or that larger footprint chair. So people are just more comfortable. They have that elbow room. They have that 36-inch aura of space now that they maybe wouldn't have had years ago.
And Carrie, I think we do actually have a video for that. So let's actually show exactly what you're talking about real quick.
Yeah, so you'll see.
This is the large banquet table setting that you're talking about.
Yeah, so we've been creating the same for corporate and for social. So larger footprint chairs, as you can see, a 72-inch round is accommodating 6 people versus the 8 to 10 that you would with a slim profile chair. So the guests are really having that elevated experience, more space. They can enjoy their conference and the content that's being given to them more, or if it's a wedding, obviously just have that elevated experience. So the micro wedding style from a space perspective is definitely here to stay that we've seen so far.
I love it. And I feel like the use of, club chairs, accent chairs like that help to fill in that space too. So it doesn't feel like an empty round. It's, yeah. Awesome. Evan, Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that being a great point with having larger services. I think as designers, that provides a lot more service area to use to do something really beautiful, something new. So I think that that actually becomes sometimes the challenge is during this whole pandemic, this whole situation has been that sometimes we need more services and we need more things to fill a space because of all the space planning. So now you have more tables and they're larger tables. We also need more products, more flowers, more things to design with. But at the same time, it's kind of a fun design challenge because we have all of this space to work with. So, I mean, personally, we love using these big tables and these big services to combine with some of the club chairs and things like that.
Exactly. So a room like Carrie, I totally agree with you. The sanctuary vibe is completely what we've been seeing. We had just done something where we brought in a lot more of the foliage and larger tables. So we're trying not to make it like a plan B or like a negative during all of this. It was more like an open experience. I personally love outdoor events. So we try to look at it like exactly what you showed in that video. A table for 10 had maybe become a table for 6 or 5, and maybe there's different ways of using it. We're seeing the pendulum swing a little bit back, but people are still loving that open space look.
Yeah, definitely. So that's great on social. Let's talk a little bit about corporate too. What about, for corporate meetings, are we seeing the same kind of sanctuary setting in the audience, on stage? What are you all seeing?
Yes, we have, a lot of clients have been coming back creating that like pod seating, and they might not have a breakout right now, or they haven't in the last 6 months now that everything's changing daily, but they'll have that one comfortable chair, that sanctuary seat for the entire duration of that 8-hour program. And they'll just stay and they'll experience the different elements of the meeting throughout in that one seat. So that seat is very important. It probably wouldn't be a ballroom chair anymore right now. It's elevating everything. And, pods are very popular, but keeping, people have their group that they work with at their office now and keeping that pod together for the meeting. So they're not really, getting close with people that they're not close with already. So we're seeing that as well.
Exactly. Evan was actually the lead on a design that we had done in New York, probably, that was 7 months ago, Evan, but could you explain how you came up with that concept?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because some of these things that we've had to implement throughout this whole situation are kind of here to stay. I think like when you mentioned things like the pod seating, things like that for corporate events or programs, we find that even at nonprofit events, social events, like people really want to maximize connection, and they want to maximize these, the areas that they can experience, to see people and to catch up. So even for whether it's corporate programs or profits, we see that there's less programming kind of. So we see a lot less, people standing behind the podium up on stage, for half an hour. We see a lot of these people choosing to do more experiential design with pods and more different kinds of seating throughout big spaces so that people can really enjoy and connect and not just sit in one chair focused, pointed one direction for the whole evening. And that seems to be something going forward that a lot of people are choosing to go with.
Awesome.
Great.
So, you all kind of teased this a little bit, but, Carrie, you mentioned things are literally changing every day. And that also comes back to the individual's perspective of like how comfortable someone can be, right? So how have each of you in your work, found ways to really adhere to various protocols such as social distancing while still being creative? And, you touched on it a little bit with the sanctuary seating, but let's talk a little bit more about it.
I'll start off, and I think Carrie has actually a lot more experience with the corporate side of it as far as planning, but let's be honest, we're thinking on our feet here. We're kind of rolling with the punches, to be honest. I don't want to give an answer that's not 100% truthful. It's like we just experienced, a series of events. One day was a wedding, and the next week was another wedding, and the rules completely changed. And I had the first bride call me and say, I wish I had known it had opened next week. My wedding had to have social distancing and masks, and the other one was completely a crazy party. And then I went on a plane to do a corporate event in another country in Bermuda, and there was complete social distancing, mask restrictions, rules, and their level of comfortability was much different. Carrie can speak to what New York, what's going on in New York.
Yeah, I mean, in New York, you go on a site visit one day and we're planning all the distancing, the plans are all like everybody's far apart and all that. And then by the time I think the event actually happened, the masks were lifted and physical distancing wasn't required. So it's just constantly like going with the flow. And some brands are ready to lift all the restrictions as the country is lifting restrictions, but some brands are not ready to do that. So like we just have to we're ready to do whatever you need to do. I mean, in the builder meeting guide that we have, everything there's designing with intention. Every piece has a purpose. Every furniture, whether it's the surface area that, you're choosing, the table size that you have, or Evan said, like the floral, I mean, everything is either there to keep people feeling like there's still that physical barrier, but it doesn't look like there's a barrier there. It's just the sanctuary seat, that comfortable chair, that elevated chair that people are going to sit in for their meeting. I mean, in that guide, it kind of touches on all these different strategies on how to design the event properly. And I have corporate clients that are coming back every week, and 1 week they'll implement everything that we've put out and everything that you could do to keep everyone physically distanced. They'll have the shields, they'll do everything. And then you'll have a client in the same week that doesn't implement any of it. So we just have to be ready, offering all the suggestions, all the different ideas, the design ideas, the methods that you could have on site. And then the client will choose what they want to actually use. And it varies from state to state. I'm based in New York. I work with my clients nationally though. So I'm constantly changing. Okay, now this one's in Florida, and Florida's a little different than New York, or, California, everyone's different. So you just have to kind of learn which each city is ready to, what you're allowed to do, which I think everything you can pretty much do now nationwide. But again, the brands vary with what their comfort level is from corporate.
And Lillian, you mentioned that staying creative and about some of this obviously can pose a challenge as a designer, producer, creative person in this industry. In a positive note, I think that a lot of this has kind of forced us into that creative corner. It's okay, we're presented with this set of rules. You have to do A, B, and C. You can't do, D, and F. So it's kind of just made us design differently. It's made us look at a space differently. It's made us use furniture and design accessories differently. So in that way, it's kind of been a fun design challenge. We get to experiment with new things, try different things that maybe the client would have gone for before. So that's been one positive I think we're trying to take from this, is learning how to use the same spaces we've always enjoyed for so many years in different ways.
Exactly.
Totally agree. Yeah, I mean, because at the default, let's say pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, you are already expert designers, so you know how to utilize the space and you have all these tips and tricks already, but now this kind of threw a curveball, right? And now it got you to kind of think outside of that box. I love it. So Carrie, you mentioned, you obviously service the continental United States. Evan and Jordan, you all also work, internationally, Bermuda, et cetera. What are some event strategies, design strategies that does vary across the globe? And what are some things that you're seeing forecasted in different countries outside the US? Jordan, you mentioned Bermuda was just still very stringent on their protocols. How would that affect, potentially people who are coming internationally, and how do we juggle all of that?
I think what I had to do there was I was actually, freelancing with another company, which was, a partner of ours internationally, and they were really swaying on the side of being conservative. So we almost had to design two things, options for the client. So one was this particular, I can get very into, was a couple series of very long tables. But this was an interesting event because the restrictions were being lifted at midnight. So I had originally had 2-3 very long tables for like 100 people, but we ended up separating them to social distance. And then at the after party at midnight, everybody had no masks on and they were like at a normal party. So it's, I think the thing is just rolling with the punches and kind of like having something up your sleeve for the same bars and tables, but have two separate designs that can utilize everything. That's kind of how we're having to work. But as far as internationally, some of the rules you just have to take them as they go. You can't get frustrated. That's how I've been. That's challenging for me, but it's like you have to, I think, err on the side of caution, I think.
Yeah, definitely been a test of patience, right? And a little more work on our end. But would you all agree that, it kind of makes sense for planners to start from the strictest, most kind of, abiding to those protocols and then kind of working backwards from there? Or would you say start from normal and go the other direction?
I think you said it much more eloquently than I did, but yes, like I think that's like how to have it, start with the most conservative, something that, that we're compromising as far as maybe experiential. And then as people's comfortability lightens up, or maybe they say, hey, you know what, I don't mind having a large bar of going to it because restrictions are okay, then let them make that decision. And that's exactly how I do it. I don't know if anybody else disagrees, but that's how I'm handling it.
I think that's the best way to do it, because I think too, Drew and I were talking about this before, and it's something our father kind of instilled in us, is that, there's a lot of the principles of design and art, like a lot of those things remain the same. So the way we design, like the aesthetics was, a lot of that remains, and what's cool is cool, but what has changed a lot and what we've had to adapt to is all the logistics and all of the ways that things get done. So, we're seeing in other places, in other countries and cities, it's, people want the same things, they want like the same wow factors. It's kind of just how it's implemented. And that's the it's always like strategizing, going from place to place. Like Carrie mentioned, it's not that our job is different. What we do is the same, but it's how we're getting it done. That has been kind of, as I'm sure you guys know, doing things all around me from warehouse to warehouse, everything is just, is sometimes a hassle or a battle.
I was also starting to create floor plans for clients that, attendees, even if the corporate company is okay with having the event and the state doesn't have any restrictions on attendees or how far apart people need to be, but the people coming could vary, so maybe creating a floor plan that has some area with people that are further apart, and some people that are a little closer together that are fine with being close together, but just making it very cohesive and a good experience for all that attend, so that the content is absorbed and you're creating that right experience and environment for the corporate client. And you have, the individuals are going to feel differently throughout the organization. So I think that's also an important design tip that I've started to push my clients in that direction, just because you want to be mindful of that, because everybody's a little different now right now as we get out of all of this crazy world that we're in.
No, I absolutely agree with you, Carrie, because we just designed something where they had, the state was open, so a large bar, and I love that. Everybody feel, politics aside, but everybody's vaccinated and everything, they're feeling comfortable. But like Carrie said, we had small little areas with a two-top and smaller areas, and we had cocktail service, and there was a couple people that were there and wanted the cocktails to come to them and have service with a mass serve. They didn't want to go to the bar. So having those sections, not just having people forced into one area, was a good tip for sure. And it looks great to mix it up too,
Yeah, definitely does.
I love it.
So Jordan, I have a question which you just kind of touched on a little bit. You mentioned that your strategy has been basically planning 2 events and, which one are they going to choose? Obviously, planning one event in and of itself is an undertaking. Mm-hmm. So outside of preparing for 2 different floor plans, I want to know from all of you, from the events you've been planning, have there been any other, planning strategies, any like tech tools you've been using that have been helping you kind of navigate this very crazy event industry landscape that changes daily, as Carrie mentioned?
Yeah, so this is how it works on my end. I go, we're designing 2 events, and you want this and I want this, and I go, okay, Evan, do that. So then Evan's going to answer the second part of it.
Yeah. But no, I mean, all joking aside, like, it usually is me dealing with all the tech stuff, but no, the planning tools are something that we've always used and we've played with, but they've become essential tools now. I mean, my brother's taken the role of my father, where he starts designing things that aren't realistic or that don't exist, so he'll put this idea together, but then we have to say, okay, well, the reality is, before we can do this and before we can sell this idea or this concept, we have to make sure that it's legal, it's appropriate for the staff, the service, the flow, the venue, fire, whatever it may be. So that's essentially an essential tool now, I think, is those space planning tools. A learning curve, but I just don't think that you can really get away with kind of winging it anymore and saying, okay, let's have everything show up and we're going to put it where we want it, which is sometimes our style as like, somewhat eccentric designers, but we really can't do that anymore as much.
Yeah, the floor plans I've been doing have been like, there's just so many of them. So you've got like option A, B, C, D, X, Y, and Z now. Yeah. But it definitely is an essential tool, because the floor plans you're using, whether there's a grid line on it to show the fire marshal that you're allowed to do it, in this way. But you need that map, you need the client to approve it, even if they might not be going on site either to do a walkthrough. They might be a virtual walkthrough. So that virtual floor plan 3D rendering that we can do is really more valuable now than ever. And like the mood board concepts, all that stuff. So, partnering with the right people that can help you present everything, the client can really get a good feel for what the event's going to look like, because it really needs to follow the plan now, as you guys have mentioned, because it's
Definitely.
safety, it's a whole different animal now.
It creates a comfort level, right?
Here, what was that, Evan?
It creates a comfort level right from the beginning. So there's not that worry and that concern, when you're installing that day. So.
Yeah.
How is that affecting lead time for events? So if you're having to honestly prepare for anything, and I feel like, at least, from my perspective, talking to planners and writing on the work that you guys do, people were given the green light in their cities or states, and it was just like, full speed ahead. We want an event done in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And I feel like the lead times from the clients have gotten shorter, but y'all have almost double the work to do. So how has that affected your lead time, your workflow? Have you had to bring on more staff, or, how are you combating that?
You're having to work with Evan. We're a smaller business that does large things, but things have obviously changed, but we have less time and less people to do more quick work. So it's been a challenge for sure. But I think as event professionals, thinking on our feet is kind of what we excel at. So we've had to, really push ourselves to think outside the box even more. I mean, I don't know. There's no easy answer to that. I mean, I know we go way back with Carrie, and she's always been amazing at doing the planning, but you're probably going over gear right now too, I imagine.
Oh yeah, it's been it's been fun, but it's fun. It's a fun challenge to have. There's such an odd time for a year and a half where I'm welcome to the challenge, and I enjoy the crazy floor plan, space plan changes, calls late at night. I need pipe and drape tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Get it there, and we'll do it. It's invigorating to be able to do that kind of planning again. But yeah, I mean, it's just staying organized. I mean, I'm one of really 12 account managers throughout the country, so we all are on it all the time, like in very close, conversations with our clients, just making sure we're executing on the right thing. And at CORT, I always advise my clients, like, order a little extra. We can always change it as we get closer. If things change, if guest counts fluctuate, you got to just change it within 72 hours before delivery, and we'll be good. Like, so I want to plan as best as we can so we have the product ready to go. And then if we need to pull a couple pieces off, we can do that, and we can change, as the guest counts right now are just probably going to change a little more often than they were in the past. So there's a solution to everything. It's just staying organized, staying on top of everything, leveraging those space planning tools too, of course, so we can move quickly with everything.
I think for another thing is just, how we've been dealing with this is just managing expectations of clients and really letting them know that, look, if there's a quicker turnaround and we have less time to plan this event, then here's 4 chairs, and we'll get one of these. You can't guarantee this specific one. We've just had to have more flexibility on our client side too. But that's just been kind of that relationship that we all have to create with all of our clients, and just saying, look, this is the reality. I mean, we can't lie to them. I mean, they know what's been going on, and we say, we're working with a lot of different vendors and a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and everybody is experiencing their own challenges. So, kind of bear with us, and here's A, B, and C, and we'll make one of these happen to the best of our ability. So that's just a reality.
Yeah, to speak to Evan's point, I mean, the reality is, like, we're like dancing around here, but like we have people calling us that we wish they were calling us all year, right? But it wasn't possible. But they'll say, like, I'm getting married in 3 weeks and I need my proposal tomorrow, which is, for us now, there's Evan, me, and my sister-in-law Ingrid. It's not realistic for us to do that, because there's only a certain amount of things that you can do in 24 hours. So we're managing their expectations. And that also being said, we're saying yes to everything when people that are realistic. I'll get in the car, and I drove 6 hours one way to the Hamptons the other day and then drove back just because that person's put their wedding off for 2 years at this point. So I want to make sure they're happy. So it's, be careful what you ask for. I wanted to be busy, and now it's coming. So it's great.
I think we're all going to be experiencing a bit of growing pains, right, after this past year, no matter where you are in the industry. Definitely. So Evan, you mentioned this a little bit. I want to touch on it a bit more and pick more of all of your brains. But you briefly mentioned the space planning and being accurate in your designs is really going to help just facilitate being more effective on site, right? And going through all these different options. So that's one learning curve. What were each of your major pain points and challenges that you did have to adjust to during this past year?
I mean, well, the micro wedding, as far as we can, this is an industry webinar here, but imagine you're having the thing that everybody else dealt with. You're having a 200-person social gathering or corporate event, and they want to do a micro wedding. Now they've been deposited for a larger event, so you're trying to make it now you're making an over the top micro wedding. So it's kind of like that was one of the biggest challenges for us, and a lot of people aren't talking about that, but that's realistic here. So you're trying to do that, and then. I'm glad that the pendulum is swinging back. That's something that we're seeing right now. It's a challenge, but also it's very exciting. So you're seeing people that took that risk of delaying their event for a year. They're getting a fabulous event now. It's just hard for them to wait and hope for the world to open up.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I'm not going to answer the question 100%, but I mean, Evan, do you see any other crazy challenges besides?
I mean, yeah, one challenge is, to be honest here, like challenge has been the budgeting and the financial part. I think there's been a lot of, not a lot, but there's been certain clients that don't understand that a lot of the effort that is going into events now to make things happen is going to cost more money, not less. And I think that that's something we should talk about, because just because there's less people now doesn't mean that the event costs less necessarily, right? We might need more tables, we might need more space, so a bigger venue, we might need more safety protocols put into place, more staff. So, I mean, a lot of those things have been, have been challenging, and just kind of a learning curve to kind of express to clients and let them know how things may or may not affect the cost.
Yeah, and Carrie, you deal with the B word all the time, right? Budget. So, right. And so I know kind of the process of doing, best, better, good, and things like that. Can you share a little bit about tactics of how clients can better adjust their budgets to still make this beautiful creative event, but obviously accommodate for that B word?
Yeah, I mean, I ask what the B word is right up front, so I don't waste my time. I don't waste their time going through 100 different options and floor plans and mood boards. So I'm just presenting the right solution from the get-go. So we kind of cut all that extra time because we don't have the time right now. So finding out the budget, agreeing to what that should be, and then, we know our furniture more than our clients know our furniture, so we can build the right, arrangement that hits the budget, makes the client happy, creates the right floor plan for what we're going to do, and then that just solves everything pretty quickly and gives them all the solution.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. Ashton, do you have anything else?
Yes. Sorry, I put myself on mute, and then we're over a year into this, and then you're like, I'm on mute. So I touched on this earlier briefly about the different comfortability levels of attendees. So not only are you as planners having to match what the clients' expectations and what their comfortability level is with different brands that you're working with, but you're also having to cater to the different attendees. And I think, Jordan, it was you that mentioned, a couple of attendees didn't want to go up to the bar. They wanted to be served in their seat. And so with those comfortability levels being different wherever you go around the world, how are you catering to the attendee habits when you're designing? And how are you preparing for that attendee experience if you get different types of attendees and not just different types of clients?
Yeah, I mean, as far as we try to address that, right after we talk about, the budget, like we can say the word, but it's tough, but that, right? We try to address that now. So now it's like budget and comfortability are like hand in hand, because both of those are the most dramatic things that are going to affect their event at this current time, right? It's like, what kind of event are we doing, and what is that budget going to be? So that's kind of, obviously we all, let's be honest here, we all love when they say they have a giant budget and they're feeling comfortable and safe, but people aren't going to have fun if they don't feel safe, right? So that's another word for comfortable. They want to feel safe. And we always say, like, you're not selling stuff, you're selling a feeling. So if they come in not feeling good, then they're not going to have fun. So I think once we get whatever their comfortability level is, we take it from there, and then the budget. But truly, it's another part of the question. What we're seeing is the pendulum swinging really far back. just Evan and I know other people are doing more corporate things, but with our social thing, if things are open and people are feeling safe, they're really partying, like, and they're going, it's swinging way back, which has been a great trend for us to see.
Yeah, I did want to ask you guys that too. Jordan, like Evan, Carrie, all of you, how are you seeing majority people just open and free and just excited to get back to live events? Are you still seeing majority that are playing it safe a little bit, or a little half and half? Where do you guys stand?
Well, what we're seeing, fortunately, I guess, is really just people pushing it to the whatever they're allowed to do, and it's kind of what they've been doing in our experience throughout this whole thing. So now that things are open, we're happy to say that things are pretty much open and are being designed and produced as we would have done it years ago. That being said, we still have things in place, right, because we've been talking about different people's comfort levels, and the reality is we don't know every attendee that's going to every event. So we have those protocols in place, and we want to make sure that if people need certain things or certain spaces to go to, that they're comfortable. But our experience is that for the most part, if we're open, we're open. But I know Carrie's might have a little bit different experience being in big city.
Yeah, I mean, it's different for everyone. It's different. The planning is different. It's ever changing. There's really, and not everything I do is even in New York too. It's all over the country. So you've got some clients will talk to me. They're based here, but they'll say, we're not doing any live at all this year. That was 3 months ago. Now the things changed. Oh, now we're going to do live this year. And I've already done some with some of my agency clients that I haven't worked with, all year. They came back this month. So it's just the constant change, and it's daily, literally is. So company that didn't want to do anything this year is doing now something. I mean, we know how to build a safe event. So as soon as a client knows they want to do it, whether it's a corporate client, because social is pretty much having their parties and having their weddings and everything's great. And as Jordan said, the pendulum is in the right direction. But with corporate, as soon as a brand is ready to go live, we know how to build that live experience for them. So come to us and let us create it for you. And, I don't think any restrictions really exist throughout the country at this moment as of now, but, things change all the time. So we just have to kind of adjust daily as they come, and that's the best we can do.
Great.
Absolutely. And I'm based on the other end of the coast. I'm based in Atlanta, and I would say that I agree, with everyone here that our pendulum has kind of swung back to normal. And Evan, to your point earlier of like keeping things safe where we can, I think like I've gone to events and like the staff is wearing masks, of course the guests aren't able to. So I think that's where planners are like, we're implementing this level of comfortability to ensure guests feel safe mingling, because a lot of times I'm sure guests are like, oh, I'm good mingling with a guest, but not the staff. And so, as long as they see guests or staff wearing masks, they just feel that level of security that the planners and the brand who's hosting it took that extra step to think about the attendee experience and think about their comfortability level. And Evan, I think you mentioned this earlier about managing client expectations. And so I wanted to ask, how are you combating a planner's perspective versus a client's point of view when you're designing, or are you having at this moment in time kind of having to bend to what the client is asking of you? And then also, how are you managing those client expectations, and how are those conversations going? Are they being understanding that, you have a small team, it takes more time, we're getting back to business, or have you felt some resistance coming from brands?
I think throughout this, I think that oftentimes it was, even if it was a hard conversation, or even if the client might not be too happy, we could at least rest on the fact that it wasn't us, right? Like there was regulations and we're just sticking to whatever we're allowed to do, right? So it's kind of passing the buck, because it's just the easiest kind of for everybody, even if they're not happy about it. Now that things are open, we're not meeting much resistance. Fortunately, there's been a couple venues that might just still be, playing things a little bit safer, which is fine. So it's just kind of been creating that relationship with the client and letting them know, before they get here, right? Like, look, just so you're aware, you might be coming from such and such state, but things are a little bit different here. So it's kind of just preparing them that, that rules sometimes depend on the venue and the little micro environment, not just the state. But for the most part, I think people are at this point, they've been pretty understanding. And most places that we've worked are pretty open. So
Yeah, I agree with Evan, and I think that the reality is like you have to. It's taught me, because I'm not the most patient person, okay, but I adore my clients and different things. But you have to, there's rules, and then there's common sense, and then there's this like what's really going to happen. So working in other countries, there's a place I went where literally you couldn't go into the country unless you were vaccinated. So I have no judgment on this. This is just what the rules were. Everybody at the party had been tested at least 5 times before this party had started. But this is recent, that people still wanted to social distance and have masks at the party. Now, maybe someone would say that doesn't make sense, but that was what the rules were, so that's what we did. So there was no pushback on it. We have to accept the rules before we jump into this thing, right? So that seems a little much maybe, but in the day after, everything didn't have to. So it's kind of been like, what's common sense? What is people's expectations, and what's really going to happen? It's been a challenge. But as far as the client pushback, people seem to really be coming together off all this. I'm trying to be positive about this. People are like really coming together and so excited to be together in any capacity now. That's what I'm experiencing anyway.
Yeah. So we have so many audience questions coming in. I'm actually going to kick it off a little early. So the first question that came in is, asking you all about hybrid events. Can each of you speak to your experience planning hybrid events? Are you still planning hybrid events, or are most of your clients looking to strictly live events?
My clients are definitely doing both. They'll tell me that there's a hybrid component, not that I do the tech, obviously, element of it, but they've told me that the bigger programs that I'm doing, they're about 200 people live, 300 people live, and then the rest are hybrid. But then I do have some corporate that it's just all in person and it's regional. So that's another element that's different. So like versus having everyone fly into a certain city and having a very large live event, we've been seeing, regional pop-ups instead on the same day. And our various warehouses will furnish like the city that they service. So it's still a full live, but there's a few of them versus one big one. We've seen that too.
Yeah, just full honesty, transparency, we're pretty much we've just been kind of just doing live events in person. It's not our expertise. We wouldn't want to do something that we just wouldn't do well, honestly. So we've kind of left a lot of those situations to other people. But we definitely, as far as it happening, yes, it's definitely, we see a lot of our friends and colleagues that are really doing a lot of hybrid events, and I think it's a good transition that's here to stay. I think some people just enjoy it as well, and it allows people that might not be able to attend something like a conference or a trade show to attend it, from a distance. So I think that might be an option that some people choose for a while. So I don't think it's going anywhere.
Yeah, I agree. Our next question was, what creative approaches have you seen or done for communal spaces or attendee lounges with high rotating traffic?
Ooh, I actually have one for that. And this kind of goes back to corporate meeting seating also. And it really is just, meeting people where they're at. So giving a little bit of different options for every, state of comfortability. So you can have love seats together where people can sit next to each other like normal and meet, or you can have just more isolated islands where people can work on their own with high tops and things like that. So that's what I've seen that's been really successful. And you just kind of let attendees and guests decide where they want to go, but have all those options available for them in that communal space.
Love that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We have the spaces that we've been creating lately. Even bar tables, communal tables, where you'd normally put 6 stools at a full communal, like maybe we'll do 4 or we'll leave it open. So the guests can just choose where they want to go and where they want to rest for a bit for those, breakout areas. And then, using what we said before, every piece having a purpose. If you're creating a breakout lounge, putting side tables at each lounge seating so it could show you where that specific seat should be, that people could, use that, and that it's still distanced apart enough so that they're comfortable sitting there, and using that table as an organic way to kind of suggest where to go if it's a big sectional. We've seen that too.
All right, I have a question. And this, Jordan, you mentioned this. Everybody's wearing masks in Bermuda, and at midnight they take it all off, right? So, well, not take it all off, take their masks off. But I feel like potentially now, as things are opening back up, the restrictions are lifted, there is that potential risk of losing potential attendees due to them being not comfortable. And have any of you encountered that? It may be more on the client side, where they tell you, hey, our headcount went down, but how do you adapt and how do you handle those situations?
I mean, what we've experienced personally, a lot of my friends in the industry have had different experiences, but trying to answer your question correctly is we've honestly seen a lot of moving the event to the way so they don't have to have a compromised event. So a lot of times, like with a corporate event, for instance, we have in the beginning when things started to open up, we had seen like the guest count go down and us trying to accommodate them. Once people got a taste, this is just our personal experience, I'm prefacing that. Once people got feeling safe and attending an event that felt, quote, normal, they're fighting to do an event like that. That's what we're seeing. So they'd rather move it 4 months to have a fun party, to have it open, to have everybody feel comfortable, than to have it now with half the attendees. So that's what we're seeing. We've had a literal answer though. So we've had a couple times where they have just literally doubled the space on a lawn because a guest of honor, a particular person, just comfortability was not there. So we, a group of 50 people had a giant lawn with umbrellas and it looked beautiful, but we've had a couple wild cards like that. But pretty much people are moving it to have a big party so they can have a good experience again. Evan, do you agree with this?
Yeah. One thing we see, this is a little anecdote, it's interesting, is we have a really great corporate client, and the lead that brings us on board is just getting married. So this person getting married, and what we're seeing is a lot of this planning and stuff is leading to some of those corporate events being pushed forward a little bit, because realizing, look, this is what's happening in these social events, this is okay. So they're taking these experiences on the social level and their personal level, and they're taking it back to their jobs and their the corporate people and saying, look, we can do this, look at what we just did. So it's interesting how this social events are helping push some of these corporate things forward, which is nice.
No, definitely. And Carrie, this kind of touches into it. We talked briefly about hybrid experiences before, and you mentioned, obviously, we don't do the tech part, but one question that came in is, how can planners weave the in-person experience with the virtual together to really create that cohesive event? And, what are some ways that you've seen people be really successful? And I mean, Evan and Jordan, you too, but what are some ways that you've seen virtual or hybrid be successful so that it doesn't feel like they're just watching a screen and that they're actually a part of the event?
I just attended an event that, the AV was facing the crowd of people. So like the people that were home, rather than just seeing the speakers, like they had different, I was actually live at the event myself, but you had a camera on the speakers, you had a camera on the crowd. So I think the people home really kind of felt like they were really a part of it. So for that was a nice element. And, having the panel seats match the audience seats, there's just so many things. We're sending those boxes to the house of the people that are going hybrid and aren't there. I mean, that's been so hot, even in weddings. Like my girls are flower girls, my infants or toddlers now. They grew a lot in the last year and a half. But, sending the boxes to my house to like ask them to be a flower girl, like it's everywhere. The corporate side with the hybrid are getting those boxes at home too, so that they still feel like they're really a part of the event experience, even though they're not there physically. So that's what I've seen recently in both social and corporate world.
That's great. And Evan, you designed, I think, Jordan, you alluded to this earlier, the event in New York last year, right? Where it was,
yes,
technically in person, but also kind of hybrid with the simulcast. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So it was an opening of a big building in New York, with pretty high profile attendees, and knowing that there was some, New York, we've had some strict rules and regulations. We want to do this like as safely and as by the book as we could. So what we did, or what we were brought on as part of a bigger team, what we ended up doing was having 5 floors of this big skyscraper split into 100 people, 50 on each wing of the building. So it was 600 people, but it was literally 100 per floor. and then there was TVs on every floor that were showing what was happening, simulcasting what was happening at the presentation down in the courtyard. So again, that goes back to our discussion before about needing more pieces and needing more furniture, because every person needed their chair and their side table for their, custom bottle of champagne and everything. And so it became a really personal experience, but in a very unusual way, where people were kind of lined up on floors looking at TV screens, but were able to experience what they would never have been able to experience in New York at that time. It's kind of a fun way to do it.
That's awesome. Okay, and then this one. So, being creative with venues, things like that, and as all the events are now resurging at the same time, folks are seeing challenges with booking event venues. And we have a question that came in that says, venue sales managers seem to be not as responsive or potentially even rusty in new positions. Is this an overall trend that others are seeing as well? Evan, you're nodding.
Yeah, it's just it's the reality. I mean, it's tough. It's I think we can't beat around the bush here. It is a challenging thing these days. It is, getting responses. People are either overworked and it's hard to find time, or they're understaffed or whatever. So it's and we find the same challenges trying to get people to respond. Is just something that we have to be mindful of. And I honestly don't know what else to say. It's
No, I can speak to this. My wife's family owns a large venue, Lombardo's, outside of Boston, and you're going from having a large staff, and then not legally being allowed to work for over a year. So then you have a limited staff being brought back, and then a large volume coming in. It's really, and I think it's, if I could speak on behalf of the venues, I think they're super excited to be back to work and trying to be accommodating. But it's almost like when the doors open, the floodgates came in, and it's literally just a supply and demand situation right now. But I think, that being said, every day things are getting better and people are getting more responsive. But yeah, that's a great question. And I think the reality is, it's like, I don't think people are consciously trying to be not responsive or rusty. I think there's just less people doing more work.
Yeah, I think we're all in this together at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And so, like, for me, with my clients, I'm one that I would never allow myself to not respond fast, because I just can't not do that. It's just not in my DNA. But now I'm getting requests from my clients that would normally have everything kind of put together a little more, but they're like, oh, I have an event for 400 people next week, and I need X amount of sofas and X amount of chairs and X amount of tables. But like, we have so many styles of that. Like, what do you need exactly? Like, what's the brand? What's the marketing behind the event? Like, you need to tell me a little more. So like, I'm way more hands-on. Like, I've always been hands-on in the last 13 years at CORT, but more so now, because the agencies that I work with and the clients that I have are just, they're spread so thin. They don't have the time to pick pieces off our website right now. So I'm kind of stepping in a much more consultative role, as is my colleagues throughout the country, just kind of piecing everything together for the event. So they don't have to spend the time like staring at the website, and then, choosing vendors that can do a little more for you too, less people to call. So, clients, I'm doing their pipe and drape, I'm doing their furniture, we're doing a little bit of everything, some branding, customization. So just one person to talk to for a few different things for your conference, and one truck that's going to arrive, and one, crew, versus trying to, manage a loading dock with various vendors. It's just everything that we can do. Again, we're all in this together. Like, let us try to solve what we can do, at least from what we can control. Like, no, I don't do tech. No, we don't do any of that kind of stuff, but I can help you with furniture and the design of the event. So, we just all have to work together closely and have patience for sure.
Exactly.
Next question we have that came in from our audience, and Lillian, you might even be able to talk to this as well, most likely. Have y'all seen any furniture pieces or layouts that just do not work in this current environment? That is just a thing of the past and it's not going to happen anymore, or at least not for a while.
I mean, I think the tight theater seating is not something we're going to see anytime soon, just because people want more space. And I heard one of my clients say, like, 36-inch or of space. I kind of like that idea. Even I think all of us can probably, we like having a little more elbow room. That's not a bad thing. And I don't think, but in 2019, designing for events in 2020, before the pandemic started, literally I would do floor plans with just chair. And if there was no space between them. we're just not going to see that. And I think that's fine. I mean, maybe we will never see that very, very tight road seating, in the next 2 years. Everyone's just going to be at least 5 inches apart or something like that. I think that's the biggest thing that's going to change right now.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that. I know. I even think, using our specialized group seating chairs, just stacking them in a row, like how we used to see banquet seating, just kind of doesn't jive well with me anymore. I don't know. I just gotten so used to bigger, better designs, and that I agree, Carrie. I think we all love our personal bubble now, not having to be locked to the chair next to us and not be able to move around, so I think we're all getting a little spoiled this past year with the personal bubble space.
I think that's part of like evolving, in any industry, in any part of life. I think that sometimes we do things because it's always the way we've always done things. And I mean, I'm fortunate that it took the situation to make us realize this in certain situations. But I mean, just because we used to do things in one way doesn't mean that going forward we shouldn't, be mindful of these things and keep it this way. I mean, I love the idea of some of these bigger tables with less chairs, and maybe these aren't necessarily bad aesthetic design takeaways, kind of take what you're given from these situations. But I agree, just because it was lined up tight before doesn't mean it has to be going forward. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I love the trend. I think that I saw it, really come to life at BizBash's event in Vegas in May that CORT did our furnishing. And I think it leaves room for this bigger, a lot more comfortable, more stylish, like swanky furniture rentals that you can really play with, because you now have the room and the green light from the client to say, yes, so we need more space. You might as well bring in these bigger furniture rentals. So I personally am a big fan of it. And I also do love my personal space. I think Lillian said we've all been spoiled and no one wants to go back to that.
Exactly.
But speaking of, like, how long do you think we'll be designing events and setups with social distancing in mind? And, not that it's like a science to it, but, we're all just kind of flying by the, as we're making the airplane as we fly it. And when do you think possibly that social distancing seating might just kind of like eventually fade out? This year, next year, not?
I think it just really depends on the person booking the event. I mean, I've done events this week that had no physical distancing, in some in New York, some not in New York. So it really just varies. I mean, for everyone, for it to not be required everywhere, I don't know if it'll ever be a place where no one's going to have any kind of physical distancing at all. But I mean, it's already started to go back to completely normal already. I don't know about you guys.
I think. Oh no, God.
No,
go ahead.
We haven't had any since we have been allowed to, do things normally. We haven't had any client in our experience that has made it necessary. So we've kind of, fortunately, knock on wood, going back to whatever normal was.
It happens quickly though. This is again my personal experience. I always preface that because I want to make sure everybody feels that I'm not pressing my opinion on people. But the reality is, like, it happened to me really quickly. Boston opened up. I went to another country, and I was automatically like, oh, like, where's my mask? Where's this? Because I had done all the protocols to feel safe, but the rules did not allow you to not still follow distancing and things. So you'd be surprised how quickly people's brains turn to feeling comfortable again. But I think Carrie's right. It's going to be, corporate policy is the biggest policy, right? So it doesn't, regardless of how, if every attendee felt safe, if the corporate policy is, we're still doing this, they're still going to do it for a little while.
And I think the one thing that will likely not leave that stemmed from this past year are the bar dividers, the people who are serving you drinks and food and things like that. I can't imagine really walking into a space right now and not seeing that kind of guard, even just, COVID aside, just general illnesses and things like that, and germ transfer. I feel like that's something that we've gotten really accustomed to. And, just for serving purposes, I feel like that's going to become more of a staple, even after this is all done with.
Yeah, just procedures that are always going to change now. I mean, at CORT, I think we have one manager at each location that's certified by the Global Biorisk Advisory Council. So, we're sanitizing everything that goes out. And when it comes back, it's sanitized. We always clean our furniture. We always maintain the quality, but now there's a sanitizing element that should be in place. And that's not a bad thing. And the same with what you said, the dividers too. It's just, I like going to the grocery store and seeing a divider on the checkout. I don't need to be that close to anybody, or getting a manicure, or all that stuff. My kids did not have any colds this fall with masks, so I don't even mind the masks for children. But there's definitely some different elements. I think the safety, sanitizing, all that stuff is something that's definitely should be here to stay, and it will be. And then other than that, everything is just kind of change from brand to brand, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do have time for one more question. And so for the up and coming budding event designers that are taking their steps into the industry at this crazy time during in the event industry, what are the best resources that you recommend for them to use right now in order to develop those skills while also navigating this time?
I mean, as far as like the skills, that's one thing. It's always always easy to look your skills by taking classes and things like that. But as far as a biggest tip I could have is like reach out to people like us now, because you'd be surprised how hectic and crazy it is for Evan and I and Carrie and Lillian that we're looking for people. So like, don't feel afraid to direct message people or call them or do whatever, because people are generally understaffed right now, and things are changing every day. So I don't, that would be my best advice, is just reach out to people now, because people are in need of young blood that is willing to work hard and be creative.
And I have to do a shameless plug, but our account executives like Carrie are just so incredibly well versed in design, in strategy, in the tips and tricks, and really just having these conversations with people is your best resource, and being exposed more and more to different event styles and just kind of absorbing. And again, shameless plug, on CORTEvents.com, we have an inspiration gallery where we show you all of the wonderful photos of events we've done. So that is a great resource for you.
I mean, this is why we're doing this, So I mean, I think that it, there's a reason why there's so many, there's conferences and trade shows and there's webinars, because not everybody lives in the same place or has the same access to companies or to physical experiences where they can go into an office or go into a florist company and get hands-on experience. But there are a lot of resources, and take advantage of these things and the content. I think especially now, it's just there's so much of it, and it's almost necessary. And like Jordan said, I think reach out to people. I think that so many times people see somebody and they're like, I'm not going to waste their time. And it's like, this is what we're all here because somebody let us reach out to them. So, keep paying it forward. And I think that's my advice.
Absolutely. Carrie, do you have anything to top us off and add to that?
No, yeah, I mean, just networking, going to the associations that are in the industry, the ILEA, MPI, WIPA, I mean, get involved there too. And that's the best place that you learn so much about the industry. And obviously, like interning or getting jobs within the industry, I mean, hands-on approach is the best way to learn a lot. And we're all in this together. As I said, we're all partners together in finding solutions for clients in the day. So just collaborate with the people that people that you respect in the industry, and we'll get there. We'll make the solutions, we'll learn together, we'll change together.
Definitely, all great advice. And I guess I have to give a shameless plug too. BizBash.com has plenty of resources. We offer budding and seasoned event designers a peek over the fence of what everyone else is doing. So if you're really wondering what those big brands or the smaller agencies, bigger agencies are doing, take a look around and we'll have plenty of stuff to give you some inspiration. But thank you so much for joining us today. To our panelists, you are wonderful. It was so great talking with all of you. And I hope you all found this conversation as inspiring as I did. Thank you again for everyone's time, participation. Thank you to CORT Events for making today's event happen. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.